Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of The Geekly. I'm Jules.
I'm Lex.
Today we're going to start with something a little bit different. We're going to talk about our best of and worst of for this TV season that we've just had. I'm really excited for this, I have to be honest. I took a lot of time creating my little list. It's a weird scrap of paper, but a lot of love went into this list.
I spent ages deliberating over this. It's actually quite difficult.
It's a thinker, isn't it?
It is, because, I mean, we've watched a lot of shows in the past year, and overall it's been kind of a mixed bag. There's been, like, some disappointments, some successes, some kind of, I wish they would have. I mean, I'm thinking about Swamp Thing in particular. Like, it had so much potential, and they kind of squandered it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it's not going on. Like, I think if it had a second season, it really could have found its feet and been running. But
which what feels like Titans is kind of doing. It started really strong, I would say.
So you want to start with our top five? Let's start on a high note, instead of shitting on something, let's be like, yeah, this is what we really loved this year.
Yeah, but I'm going to start at number 5 and then go towards number 1.
Okay, mine are in no particular order because I can't play favorites. Okay. So this is just my general top 5 and they're all equal.
Okay, I will start at 5, but some of yours will probably be the same as mine, so probably. You can jump in. Okay, number 5, the show that this whole year shocked me the most, had zero expectations, absolutely enthralled me, charmed me. Can't think of that much bad to say about it. Carnival Row.
Yeah, Carnival Row is in my top 5 as well. I was actually really excited about it. I saw the preview and I brought it to you and was like, we should do this, and you're like,
very skeptical.
Yeah, I don't know about that. And I even expected when we went to do the episode that you'd be like, no, this is shit. This is why did we watch this? This is a total waste of my time. But you turned out liking it.
I was not expecting to feel the way I felt watching this. Orlando Bloom, haven't seen anything good since Lord of the Rings, Pirates of the Caribbean. Cara Delevingne, as I said.
I didn't really know, I've heard her name, but I don't really think I've seen her in anything or had much interaction with her, so I didn't know what to expect from her, but, she really rocked that role.
Oh, just really, I mean, they were both great. They both played off each other so well. The world building was incredible. Even the kind of lesser stories gave me something. I wasn't quite as dismissive of them. I think as you felt they were a bit of a waste.
There were too many of them going on at once. And I get what they were trying to do, particularly with the Puck and I can't remember her name, the aristocrat lady. Yeah. It was a very important message, but it was possibly something that should have come into season 2 while we focused on the main storyline between Cara Delevingne and Orlando Bloom and what was going on with them. Because that was kind of the more interesting thing, and the aristocratic storyline seemed, at the very least, if they'd connected them more, they just seemed too separate for me. But even with that, I wish they'd had fewer storylines. I mean, the world building is beautiful.
The aesthetic, the whole thing. I mean, their wings, god damn it.
I know, I love the wings.
So good.
And very often in shows, when wings are put on human beings, they're very flawed.
Yeah.
I have a fixation with winged creatures, so humans with wings I'm very, very critical, but I was fascinated by the dragonfly wings on these people and the way they did it. I kept trying to figure out if it was like CGI or actual costumes or a mix of the two, and just it worked really well.
Go and watch it.
Definitely.
That's my recommendation. If you think you're going to hate it, as I did, you may be pleasantly surprised.
I'm looking forward to season 2.
Absolutely.
I want more of this world and more of what's happening. And I think it's also kind of very relevant to today in ways that a lot of shows have tried to be, but it's also been its own thing. Thinking about The Boys and some of the other superhero shows, they've been kind of very on the nose with replicating real life issues, and it hasn't always worked out quite well. Like Supergirl did it for a bit with the Alien Act, and Ben Lockwood advocating to round up all the aliens and do stuff with them, but they just kind of hammered it in too much. Because, I mean, I appreciate when they touch on real-life issues, but I think Carnival Row did it in a much more subtle, natural way, so it fit the story and it didn't feel shoehorned in like some of the other shows have.
Dark Season 2 was just game-changing. I mean, we watched Season 1 the week before. I'd never seen it before. Like a Scandi noir, cross with time travel, very stylized. It wasn't
it's another show that has a great aesthetic to it, and I think they used a lot of kind of gothic tropes as well, but in a very sort of subtle way. I know the weather was very important in what was going on. I really enjoyed their depiction of time travel, which it's kind of an unusual version of time travel than what we get. It's usually when there's time travel, it's all about changing something in the past or changing something in the future, and this was more just kind of, they were stuck in a loop, basically.
Yeah.
It didn't make my top 5, but it is a very good show.
Yeah, and don't be afraid the fact that it's not in English.
Do subtitles.
Do subtitles. Try something new if you're not normally somebody that listens to things that aren't in English. It's got the perfect balance of like sci-fi. This appeals to so many people. People who like a bit of British drama, kind of feel like a darker tone. It's kind of Scandi noir. You like your sci-fi. It's a perfect coming together. It's like a Venn diagrams kind of situation, all of those aspects.
I would say too, if you're not somebody who's into sci-fi, if the idea of time travel makes you think, oh hell no, watch this show. Yeah, it has a little bit of sci-fi elements with the time travel bit, but that's not the focus. I wouldn't say this is a sci-fi show. It's definitely a drama, and as you said, the kind of Scandi noir aesthetic and atmosphere, which I think is a completely underrated genre of film and television. I don't know what they're doing up there in the cold, dark Scandinavia.
Maybe that's it. They've got nothing else to do.
They've got nothing else to do, but they come out with some really solid dramas, and this is definitely one of them.
Just beautiful. That'd be the word I would use to describe it. Just so many shots were like pictures you'd want hung up in your house.
Oh yeah.
It's got some of that Netflix money thrown at it. Just
and the acting
beautiful.
is superb as well, particularly because you have several different actors playing the same characters over different periods of time, and not once did I like they were always immediately recognizable. And I even like Googled to see like did they age this actor for this role, and no, they didn't. They just found another actor. That always thrills me when you manage to have that kind of collaboration, 3 different people playing one character, and it all feels completely natural and
seamless.
Seamless. And they even kind of looked a little bit alike as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, way to go for the casting department on Dark. They did an excellent job.
Let's move on. My number 3, I'm pretty sure this would be in your top 5, The Umbrella Academy.
Definitely, yeah. It may be, I mean, my top 5 is, kind of all created
equal ones, yeah.
But Umbrella Academy is I'm
a little bit more equal.
A little bit more
others.
equal than the others. It's one that I'm still thinking about, and like I'm so excited for more. I want to read the comics. It kind of caught me by surprise because I was completely unaware of its existence until the show came out, and then it was just like, oh my god, this is my kind of thing.
Fascinating story, well cast, great sense of humour. It's got mystery, it's got action. And yet again, this is kind of like a bit of an alternative sci-fi. It's a bit of an alternative superhero origin story in many ways. Kind of like a more modern day approach to the idea of superhero stories. I kind of wanted to go straight back and watch it again, but the sheer volume of TV hasn't allowed me to do that yet. I mean, any favourite moments, any favourite characters?
I really like Klaus. I do tend to like characters like that, the kind of, I don't know why, but the weird eccentric junkie character always seems to like grab me. Maybe I feel like I need to take care of them or something. I don't know. But
the great thing about Klaus as well is like the Klaus-Ben double bill.
Yeah.
Because he can see Ben and he can sort of channel Ben's powers into the real world.
And the interaction between the two of them was just great. And it very much was kind of like a sibling relationship between the two of them. Also, 5.
That's my one, yeah.
Every time he was on screen, I was infatuated. It was just like this. It's a difficult character to do well, and it's a kind of character that it appears an awful lot. So trying to make it new and fresh, I think, is a big challenge. And both the writers, the directors, and the actor pulled it off. They made him an interesting and dynamic character that felt like somebody we hadn't really seen before.
Yeah, the youngest of all of them, but this cynical, cantankerous, world-weary kind of guy, because he has lived so long.
Yeah.
He just hasn't aged, but he did it so well.
And I think like that, again, speaks to the talent of the actor. I mean, we see it a lot with younger actors trying to play older characters, and it doesn't always work. It's always kind of a little bit of a pantomime, but in this case, it was absolutely believable that despite the fact that he looked about 15, that he was this, like, aged, world-weary person who just happened to have a baby face. So, I mean, well done to them for that.
Again, like with all these shows so far, desperate for more. These are worlds I want to spend more time in. Another world I really want to spend more time in, or should I say, out of this world, in the universe, the Orville, Series 2. I didn't think this would be in your top 5.
No, it's not in my top 5.
Again, it's about how it made me feel. The movement from Series 1 to Series 2, there was a lot less humour. it felt, you probably disagree with this, it felt a lot less Seth MacFarlane humour styled, and it felt like it was more leaning towards the Star Trek and leaning away from the Family Guy, which I personally enjoyed. But I will say again, that two-parter Kalon episode where they went to the Kalon homeworld, they pissed them off, and the Kalon were basically coming to attack Earth. That fight for Earth was just amazing. I even liked the episodes with the Krill as well, where Seth MacFarlane's character is kind of, in season 1 he had this altercation with the Krill, and one of them's been playing for him for a fool, pretending to be like a love interest, and then they capture him, and these stories all coming together. Really like it, really like the cast, really like what everybody's kind of doing at the moment within the world. And my weakest character in season 1 was recast. Well, not recast, she was kind of shipped off somewhere else, and a new person in her role came in. I can't remember the name of her race or the name of the character, but like the strong female. And she's, for me, infinitely better than the one from season 1. So it's a stronger cast. They're making the right decisions by leaning into the sci-fi, leaning into the world of hope. You know, they are intergalactic diplomats rather than warmongers. And yeah, it's a world I really enjoy being a part of. And yeah, that Kalon 2-part was special TV for me. So yeah.
I mean, I enjoy the Orville. It fulfills my like Star Trek quota.
Itch,
yeah. I mean, I think we did it backwards. Like I watched Star Trek and then ran out of Star Trek to watch, and so started on the Orville. You did it the opposite way.
Yeah, I've been watching a bit of The Next Generation. Yeah.
But I actually even recommended the Orville to somebody recently, one of our patrons actually, who was looking for, you know, some fun TV. And I thought, you know, the Orville is kind of perfectly like that. You know, it's definitely an homage to Star Trek, but it does manage to be its own individual thing. You never watch it and think, oh, they're just copying Star Trek. It's a similar aesthetic, a similar feel, but it's also very unique. And I do appreciate the fact that Seth MacFarlane's humor is reduced.
Yeah.
If you're not a fan of Family Guy, I'm not a fan of Family Guy. I think it has its hits and misses, but it's largely very childish humor. Give the Orville a try, because it's a different Seth MacFarlane than we've seen in a lot of his creations.
This feels like the second act of his kind of career.
Yeah, it's a little bit more grown up, a little bit more introspective. They do deal with some serious issues in very sensitive ways. I mean, I think the storyline where Bortus and his husband end up having a daughter, and that's, you know, taboo on their planet and their culture, and they want to have this sexual reassignment surgery for her, and just the different debates that go on in the ship, and whether or not they should interfere, and the debates between Bortus and his husband. I thought that was a really interesting way to handle kind of gender issues, and they did it in, like, it wasn't very preachy, but you got the message across, and not a lot of shows are able to handle something like that in such a kind of meaningful way, where you like really felt for both characters. And I even felt for Bortus' husband, whose name I can't remember. He was advocating... Clyden, yes. Clyden was advocating having the surgery, and me, I was just like, no, you can't do that. But I also sympathized with his position at the same time, and I think that's really difficult for a show to pull off, or any kind of story to pull off, to get you to sympathize with a character who has diametrically opposite viewpoints from you.
I like that some of those kind of stories continued in series 2 as well, because they aren't the kind of things... You got that classic sitcom element of everything kind of goes back to the beginning again, as if nothing happened. Tabula rasa, is that right? You know, these are big issues that should not be just swept away. And you find out, you know, during season 2 that Bortus has not really let it go, as he shouldn't, you know, which I like. It's a very kind of adult take on TV.
And we get to see the effect of that decision on Bortus's and Clyden's relationship, and that, again, is dealt with in a very...
I'm just thinking of the episode where they deal with it and he's going to the porn simulator. Sorry, undermined a really kind of important moment there. I apologise.
Yeah, I mean, they dealt with it, again, in a very natural way. Like, you could see why the conflict was happening between them, but it wasn't this overblown sort of thing. It was just both were very quietly trying to put their relationship back together and come and reconcile their different viewpoints. Yeah, I mean, it's a good show. Not in my top 5, but... obviously, I would recommend it to people.
So what would be one of your top 5 that I haven't covered yet?
Doom Patrol.
Doom Patrol, okay. Not in my top 5, yeah.
I like it for the same reasons that I like Umbrella Academy. It's a different view of the superhero story than we've seen before. You know, these people are essentially a bunch of misfits who have no real desire to be heroes, but end up having to do heroic things. And they're all just so dysfunctional and trying to deal with their dysfunctions. I really like Larry. Cliff is probably my least favorite character, aided by the fact that Brendan Fraser voices him. It's a bunch of really interesting characters. I want to see what happens to them. I want to see like where they go. I like the aesthetic, the atmosphere. I want more of it.
Bringing Timothy Dalton in, I think it was a really good decision.
Oh, definitely. I would love to have more Timothy Dalton in Doom Patrol, and particularly because we just rewatched Titans, and we got to the episode with preview of the Doom Patrol. So I was comparing the original actor with Timothy Dalton, and Timothy Dalton was definitely the better choice.
Yeah.
Doom Patrol's in my top 5.
Do you want to do your other one?
Titans is probably my favorite traditional DC show. I'm also a little bit obsessed with Dick Grayson at the moment, so a show where he's the main character, and I'm so excited for Nightwing. Like, every episode I'm like, is this episode we get to see Nightwing? Of course it's not. We probably have quite a while before we get there, but I'm definitely enjoying this, like, him trying to figure out his identity between Robin and Nightwing. I mean, he obviously doesn't know he's going to be Nightwing at this point in time, but we do. So just kind of watching that journey of how he becomes a new superhero is really interesting.
I think Dick Grayson is one of the best kind of superheroes on TV at the moment. And it's like I said, it's nice to have someone that's kind of has had their origin. They're kind of in the middle of the thing now. And we don't need to have all these montages of them figuring it out. Most of the other Titans are figuring it out, but it's nice just to have someone that's...
Well, and it's a bit different because the other Titans are kind of figuring out who they are, but they also have Dick and Dawn and Hank and Corey, these sort of older mentors to teach them. So it's less like the stereotypical, this is how the hero began. I mean, you think about like the Arrowverse, and every single one was an origin of how they came into being a superhero, whereas even though, you know, like Rachel and Gar and them are still figuring out their abilities, they already had a history of using them before we met them. So it's not like they've just been given these special abilities. It's they're now just figuring out how to hone them so that they can be superheroes. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I think this show has incredible potential for the future.
I think it's also a really great example of the DC streaming universe, like what they're going to present to us. Because I mean, it was our first glimpse into what they wanted to do, and I remember watching it the first season for the first time and just being like, yes, this is the kind of superhero show I want to see.
Yeah, I mean, they name drop, you know, Superman, they name drop Batman, they name drop The Flash.
Roy Harper recently.
Roy Harper, yeah, I thought that was very interesting. Everybody's available.
Yeah.
You know, there aren't any kind of Marvel-esque issues where Spider-Man's here, then he's there, then he's back again. Everybody seems to be in play. They talk about the Justice League openly. Still hoping for some kind of flyby at the very least from Superman. Huge potential for the future. And if I'm honest, I've got more from these first 2 episodes of Series 2 than I probably did from all of Titans Series 1. They've learned and they've moved forward. There isn't any kind of spinning of wheels or anything. They know what they're doing and they're kind of pushing in that direction, which I really appreciate and respect, because the amount of shows that do not learn, and then maybe 6 episodes in, they'll kind of then pivot in the way they should be going. My number 1 is actually Daredevil Season 3.
Oh my god. I'm not surprised, actually. You're obsessed with Daredevil.
I just think it's a really good example of what a superhero TV show can be. I like the villain, I like the heroes, I like the world that they've created for him. It's the best choreography for fighting on TV, I would say.
That I would agree with.
Yeah.
I mean, the choreography, while I do personally find some of the moves ridiculous.
You don't like the side flip?
I don't like the side flip. I watch him do some of these things, and I just think, like, if you were in a real fight, you would not be doing that shit, particularly if you're blind. But the choreography is quite beautiful.
I mean, best on TV of any superhero show, would you say? I mean, Titans feels like it could be coming in that direction. I think some of the
fight scenes with Dick Grayson get pretty close to Daredevil's choreography, because you have sort of a similar thing where, you know, he does a lot of acrobatics because of his background. So I think potentially the best fight choreography, but Titans has the potential to surpass it.
I think everybody in Daredevil is perfectly cast. I like that everybody's given their own moments to shine. I like that the kind of backup characters weren't happy with being in his shadow. They've all kind of succeeded in their own ways. Foggy's doing his stuff. He was going to do something politically, but then he's doing his stuff with the big organisation, working for Carrie Ann Moss's character. Karen's doing her stuff for the newspaper, and they've emerged from underneath him, and so it feels like an ensemble show now. And I like that because I don't think he was quite strong enough to lead the whole show by himself.
No, he wasn't. I agree with that. They definitely needed to... Both Foggy and Karen are amazing characters. Yeah. The casting is really great on both of them. Really dynamic actors who just really sort of encapsulate the roles. And I think giving them more prominence really helped the show. The thing with a lot of superhero shows is that the actual superhero is usually not enough to carry it. They need the backup team. They need somebody to sound off of. You know, we've talked about how Batman is usually best when he's in the shadows and not the focus. And I think, you know, having Foggy and Karen doing their own thing in addition, and also holding Matt accountable and saying, you know, what you're doing is fucked up and it has this effect on us, which is something we also don't see very often. Usually the kind of supporting bit players are either completely oblivious to what their friend is doing, or they're like really supportive, whereas it was kind of a theme in the Netflix shows that the supporting cast was always there to kind of say, you know, what you're doing is not normal and it's not safe and you're gonna get in big trouble, and plus the fact you're having this effect on all of these other people. So that was interesting.
I think that Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, as I've probably said 1,000 times on this podcast so far.
Really? You like Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin?
I quite like Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin. I would put him in the top 3 current MCU. I know this isn't in the MCU, tragically. I wish it was, because I'd love Vincent D'Onofrio to go up against Spider-Man, or maybe that's not even on the cards anymore these days. Him, Loki, and Thanos is my Mount Rushmore of current kind of Marvel villains in film and television. I think he's just exceptional in the role. It, for me, is, along with Arrow Series 2, the gold standard for what a superhero show can be and how it can make the audience feel. Because, you know, quickly talking about Arrow Season 2, when they were fighting the Mirakuru soldiers and they came out of that tunnel, the 3 core people, I think Roy Harper was there, Speedy was there, a Black Canary was there. That was, I mean, I got like, you know, goosebumps. I got like butterflies in my stomach. At times seeing, you know, Vincent D'Onofrio, Punisher in season 2 as well, coming up against Charlie Cox's Daredevil, that just really connected with me. And the sad thing is they had a season 4 planned, and obviously with things that are happening with Disney Plus, that's not going to happen now. It'd be so nice if it was released as like a graphic novel or something. I would just consider it to be imperfect, but does so many things right that so many other superhero TV shows could really listen to. And obviously the Netflix money helps, but it's just a beautiful show. And I think season 2 was better than season 1. I think season 3 was better than season 2. So it was always growing for me.
And that is something you kind of hope for a show, that like each progressive season will get better and better and better. I mean, we've talked about it before, that a lot of shows, their first season is a little bit shaky, a little bit them like finding their feet, and then they kind of hit their stride in season 2. Yeah, I think it's really important for a show to be able to allow itself to grow and not just get stuck in that comfort zone of, oh, this worked well in this season with the fans, so let's just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Whereas Daredevil did, as you say, evolve over the different seasons.
Yeah, and it would have been so easy to have kept Karen and Foggy as like these sycophants. Yeah, Matt, yeah, you go out and do that. I'll wipe the blood away when you come back half dead. But they didn't. They kind of went out there and flexed their own muscles. And again, I would just love to have seen the Trinity again in season 4 with this, because they really fell out. Like, they fell out for a long time. It wasn't a 1-episode wonder.
Which again is a brave move, because a lot of times they do have conflict with the hero and their associates, friends, family, whatever. But in a lot of the superhero shows, the conflict is resolved very easily, whereas they let us sit with, you know, Foggy and Karen being really, really angry, and justifiably so, with Matt Murdock, and that just, it had a really realistic vibe to it.
And they made Matt the villain, because, I mean, we as viewers could watch some of the things he was doing to Karen and Foggy, and they are beloved characters. You know, they're not always happy, but you think of Foggy's like a little puppy dog, you know?
Yeah, you just want to give him a hug.
Yeah, like. And Karen, similarly, after her kind of season 1 near-death experience where they kind of brought her into the fold, and he was really doing terrible things. And as a viewer, you kind of wondered, does this man actually deserve their forgiveness? But they were very magnanimous, and they all became friends again. And yeah, would love to have seen more, but it was always going to be a superhero show, my number 1. But that gave me the most kind of the feels, I think, the superhero feels, I would describe it as. Should we move on to our most hated, or?
still have one
Oh,
more.
you've got one more? I thought we'd gone through all of them.
No, we went through all yours. I have one more.
One more, apologies.
So in my top 5, Swamp Thing actually made it into my top 5. I debated it a bit because it only got one season. I've kind of like separated it from other things and tried not to like it too much. It did have its flaws, it did have its problems, but again, I think it's a very good example of what the DC streaming universe is going to bring us. I loved the aesthetic, the gothic feel to it. I wish we would have had more of Swamp Thing. I think if they'd had a second season, they really would have hit their stride and come up with something pretty special. Yeah, I really enjoyed this introduction to the character, and the questions they raised and the special effects were just amazing, really. And there were a lot of really kind of interesting characters in that little town.
Yeah,
so.
I want to try and remember it for the good things. I struggle to. The further it went, the more kind of they were drowned out by peculiar decisions.
Yeah, I mean, the end of the season, you can definitely see that there was behind the scenes shit going on.
Yeah.
But I think the overall premise, the overall kind of idea behind it was really solid, and unfortunately it wasn't allowed to be the best that it could be.
You couldn't really sum it up any better than that. Stylistically, aesthetic-wise, tonally, 11 out of 10. I mean, just, you couldn't want anything more than what it gave to us in that kind of opening. Well, all of it, you know, the horror, and particularly that, I think it was episode 2 when there was someone in the morgue and they started going, I don't know how to describe, like something like Resident Evil, basically. Great, nothing else like that on TV, and yet they decided to pull the plug. It's just heartbreaking.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, this could have been a very special show. It's just unfortunate that less creative minds were making the decisions.
I've picked 4 moments from 2018, 2019. The plane scene from The Boys.
Obviously, yeah, that's...
I mean, it's pretty breathtaking.
You've still been going on about it. Like, every week, you're like, the plane scene from The Boys, the plane scene from The Boys.
It's really breathtaking. I kind of want more of those high-level superhero missions in Series 2. I want that to kind of drown out the guy whose name I just continue to forget. That was special to me. When the Kalon reach Earth in the Orville Season 2, that shot, it's just a shot, all the ships in front of Earth basically saying, you know, you shall not pass, gave me chills, actually. I really enjoyed that. The Fae all floating above that kind of religious place in Carnival Row, when they...
Oh, yeah, that was breathtaking as well.
You hear the wings, but you don't see anything, and then, like, Orlando Bloom kind of pivots up, and it's just a load of these people hovering above this particular religious place. I mean, great aesthetic. The sound, you think, what is that? And then you just see them, and it's, again, the wings, when they all come down, look beautiful as well. A really well-made scene. And the final one, is it Rhaegal's death with the scorpion bows in Game of Thrones?
Yeah, I think it's Rhaegal.
She's flying on Drogon, I think. And I think Rhaegal is next there, possibly. And Rhaegal gets taken down. Obviously, then she makes the decision not to go for the ships. And then in the next episode, she does, but let's forget about that. The shock value of Rhaegal being taken down by the Iron Fleet with the scorpions. Yeah, it came out of nowhere, and it was a real kind of...
I do have to say that for me, both of the dragon deaths were kind of heartbreaking for me.
Yeah.
Probably more than any character on the show. I know if you read the books before the show came out, this is going to be like, you're an idiot. But the only other death that shocked me as much as the dragons was Ned Stark's death. Because, I mean, Sean Bean was playing him, so yeah. I was not at all looking for him to be killed in the first season. I thought, you know, this guy's going to be around forever. And the way they portrayed him was a very strong character, and then, you know, he gets beheaded. And I was like, well, damn, that's the kind of show we're in. And then the dragons kind of hit me similarly.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say, really. I mean, it was a took your breath away kind of moment, not expected. I think they just had some kind of victory, and they were flying back to Dragonstone, I think. And just there they came, the scorpions. Let's move on to worst. How many have you got for worst?
I've got one worst and kind of an honourable mention for worst.
I've got worst and I've got 2 honourable mentions. Should we do honourable mentions first, or how do you want to do it?
Let's do the honourable. We'll work up to the worst.
Okay, well, I'll start with the honourable mention, but it couldn't really count because we only watched 2 episodes of it, and that was Manifest, which I thought was an absolute piece of shit.
I completely forgot about Manifest. Yeah, that's on my worst list.
Yeah.
Like, that's how bad it was. I blocked it out.
And people were like, this is the next Lost. And I was like, no, you fucking don't. It was like a Hallmark made-for-TV movie with terrible acting.
A huge emphasis on God.
Yeah.
And, I mean, fair enough. Some people like that.
Yeah.
There are people who believe in God. And I'm not opposed to God coming into the factor. I mean, I love Good Omens. I love
Yeah.
Lucifer. Quite a lot of the shows that I watch make use of the kind of Christian ideology and figures. But this just was preachy.
Every other line was, I can't remember what they said, but it was very...
There was no sort of theological investigation. There was no sort of differing viewpoints. Everybody was like, this is God's plan. We just have to accept it. And I think as a storyteller, that's just a really easy way to justify what you're doing. You can have a Christian story without just falling back on the trope of, oh, God intended it to be this way. Particularly something like this, I feel like, you know, the incident of like disappearing for 5 years would make people potentially question their religion. Yeah. And it would have been a good opportunity to see some, you know, really devout people sort of puzzling through their faith and coming up against something they couldn't really explain, couldn't really figure out, you know, why God intended it to happen. It wasn't deep enough for me. It was very superficial, and I don't think it was very well thought out.
I would echo all of that. The one thing that's kind of dawned on me over the weeks since watching that, and I don't really give Manifest much of my time, it was how kind of blasé planet Earth as a species, as a planet, was with the fact that these people disappeared for 5 years and then were back, because they were just living their normal lives. Like, you think the Vatican would come in like, this is an act of God. You think, you know, all the religious leaders of the world would turn up and
I can imagine there would be like you know, between government agencies, religious organizations, fringe organizations, random people. I can imagine all of these sort of institutions and organizations vying for access to these people to use them to kind of justify their own view of the world. Scientists wanting to like study them,
take their blood and X-rays, and all sorts.
And yet they were just kind of, oh, you've been gone for 5 years. Okay, go back to your homes, whatever. Yeah,
like straight back into their jobs. The two police were just there the next day. It would have been like a new Area 51 situation where they would have been absolutely put in black vans, taken off, never seen from ever again. Yeah, a bit of a turd.
Yeah,
that show. My other honourable mention is The Flash. I was hoping that The Thinker was like a one-off, and then Cicada came along, the villain that they just could not stop.
Because The Flash is my worst.
Oh, well, please, go for it. Dive in.
Season 5 of The Flash is the worst. The Thinker season was disappointing. Well, it was frustrating that The Thinker was like constantly outthinking them and they were constantly failing. It was sort of built into the villain that he had this sort of mastermind intellect who could think, you know, so many steps ahead. And
clues in the title.
He could see all the possibilities and all the eventualities and the probabilities and stuff. So as frustrating as it was actually believable. When we got to Cicada, they couldn't catch Cicada because they just kept making stupid rookie mistakes. And we're like, you know, we're in season 5. Flash has been doing this for 5 years now. He's also had Oliver as a mentor who's been doing it for 7-8 years. He's friends with Supergirl. He knows all of these other, you know, superheroes, and yet for some stupid reason they can never manage to pin down Cicada. And it just, you throw Nora into the mix and you get this kind of weird ABC TV drama between Nora, Iris, and Barry, and it just really dragged the show down, I thought. I mean, Nora wasn't a very likable character to begin with, and throughout the season she got even less likable and more useless. And, you know, her whole thing with Eobard Thawne and all of that.
You know, people love Nora on Twitter.
They're wrong.
I see it so often. People absolutely love Nora, and she's the most incompetent human being that's ever graced any of the Arrowverse shows ever.
Even worse than Curtis?
Yes, even worse than Curtis.
Wow, that's a serious...
I've never thought about that before, but you're right. Even worse than Curtis, who was up to this point my worst character.
But see, Curtis, well, his Mr. Terrific thing was not great. He did have a practical use as a tech guy.
Yeah, he should have been next to Felicity as the team expanded. 2 tech people or 2 people in the chair, as Spider-Man Homecoming would call it. That was where his strength was. Being pushed out into the field. I also would have dialed back his kind of comedy, you know, or quote-unquote comedy.
It was a bit hit and miss. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't.
Yeah, when he'd say things like, "Are you gonna say it? Shall I say it? Are you gonna say suit up, or am I saying it? Who's saying it? Who's saying it? Who's saying it?" Like every episode, that joke would come out, and it was just like groan-inducing at the best of times. But Nora, there are no redeeming qualities.
She was a petulant child who caused problems.
She was a hindrance to the team the entire time. She was practically working against them for the entire time. Glad she's gone. Will not miss it. I imagine she'll be written back into the show somehow due to Flashpoint or due to Crisis on Infinite Earths. God help us all if she is.
Maybe they'll write her in and then kill her off.
Maybe. And yeah, Cicada, the worst villain there's been on any of the shows, a D-list villain at best, and somehow kept foiling their plans.
And most of the time, they didn't catch Cicada because they were just standing there while Cicada ran away.
Yeah.
And
that fucking lightning wand thing that just... Yeah, let's move on. Hopefully this...
So, what's your worst show?
Game of Thrones.
Because of the ending?
Dum dum da da dum dum da da dum dum da da dum dum. I think it's my worst show because of the promise of seasons 1 to 7. You know, if they'd done one good season and then one bad season, you kind of think, okay, well, the first was a fluke. But a few people said, well, season 7 wasn't that great, was it? You could start to see the problems. I couldn't. I was very happy with season 7.
I mean, I thought seasons 1 through 7 were amazing. I was so excited for season 8 after season 7 that, as you said, there was a lot of promise, there was a lot of potential there. And then they just fucked it up. Yeah,
I mean, some of my favourite moments in the whole show are from season 7. The only thing that is obvious is that they discovered the quick travel cheat to get across the map very, very quickly. I was okay with that. You know, things are coming to a head. It's fair enough. We don't need to see them march on horseback for 3 episodes to get where they need to go. That's okay. But season 8, where do you begin, really? It was inconsistent, literally from one episode to the next. Dany went from, you know, in episode 2 she was fine to torching a city in episode 6.
Mm-hmm.
How many episodes were there? 6 or 5? So she, like, in the space of 3 episodes, she went from being absolutely great, talking to Sansa about, I'm now around the world fighting his war, like who tricked who or who fell in love with who or whatever, to Sansa in that particular conversation. 3 episodes later she's torching King's Landing.
The big problem with that, because I mean, given everything that happened, it is believable that Dany would kind of go a little bit mad with power. There was a lot of foreshadowing about that, you know, with the Targaryens and their kind of violence and cruelty and inbreeding and various issues they have. But the problem with it was, as you said, they did it too quickly and they did it off screen. We did not get to see her evolution. We saw her once being, you know, Dany the Liberator, breaking the wheel, saving slaves, freeing people, and then, like, the next episode, she was burning the city to the ground. And they didn't take the steps to get her from point A to point B.
What do you say to the people, Lex? And there are countless who will defend this show to their dying breath, the hill that they will die on. What do you say to the people that say, no, you're wrong. The seeds were planted. It was all there. We've seen Dany torch masters. We've seen her kill people. We've seen her set the dragons on, you know, loads of ships floating about and stuff. You're the problem, because that's what people love to say on Twitter.
First, I would say that 1, I have a doctorate in writing stories. 2, okay, yes, the seeds were there, but, and I have this problem with several things in the MCU, namely, you know, the Professor Hulk thing. You know, we had the whole conflict between Bannon and the Hulk not coming out, and the next thing we see, they've somehow fused together and created a balanced, harmonious individual, but we didn't see that evolution. And it's the same thing with Dany. Yes, the seeds were planted, but you can't have her in one episode being this benevolent leader and then literally the next week burning millions of innocent people alive. You know, it would have been one thing if she'd like when she set fire to the ships. Okay, yeah, it's a military thing. She's fighting a war. Go for it. But everybody around her was saying, you cannot burn King's Landing because you're just like everybody else. You're not doing anything different. And her whole thing was that she wanted to be different. She wanted to break the tradition of the Targaryens. And I don't have a problem with her character arc. I have a problem with how they paced her character arc. We needed to see her taking the steps into that evolution. For me, I found it quite shocking, even though, you know, yeah, you can look back and, you know, she crucified the masters, she did some other things, but everybody she did something horrible to had done horrible things to innocent people.
Absolutely. She was killing masters to spare women and children. Going to King's Landing, killing women and children. That's, you know.
And the masters she killed had crucified, you know, over 100 children. So, like, it's not like she was doing horrible things to nice people. These were, like, quite cruel, vindictive people. It was kind of an eye for an eye sort of thing that she was doing. So, yes, we always saw that she had the potential for violence, she had the potential for cruelty, but she also had a very defined moral compass. And women and children in particular were protected. But when she took on King's Landing, that suddenly didn't matter anymore. And she didn't even target like the soldiers in King's Landing or the Red Keep. She did the whole city and was just completely uncaring.
One of the big villains of the whole thing, Cersei, being killed by some rocks. Your thoughts?
Both her and Jaime died then. I was really disappointed with the end of their arc. Jaime's arc had so much potential in it, and there were so many ways they could have done it, and like he almost redeemed himself. I don't have a problem with him dying, but I felt like he needed a more meaningful death than what he got. And again, you know, as you said, Cersei was the kind of main villain, and to have her killed by accident, essentially, is just kind of convenient. Jon should have killed her, or Dany should have killed her, or Arya. That would, like, Arya didn't get to kill anybody on her list, so at least let her kill Cersei. Fuck, even Sansa had reason to kill. Like, all of these people had legitimate claims to kill Cersei, and none of them got the opportunity, and it was just kind of a fluke that she ended up dying. It was just kind of like, oh, we're done with these characters. Okay, they die in a cave-in. Yeah. The end.
My biggest problem, well, I've got so many problems, I don't know if it's the biggest, it's just another one. Jon not really having anything to do with the death of the Night King. It seemed to me that was his whole shtick for the past couple of years. I would have given season 8 episodes, or the normal amount of episodes, to do the Cersei thing. Season 9, 8 episodes to get rid of the Night King. Give it the time it deserved.
Yeah, that's I would agree. They rushed the ending of it, and it shows. In my honorable mentions for worst show, one, I have The Boys, because it disappointed me greatly. I think it had a lot of potential. There were a lot of good moments in it, but overall it was just kind of chaotic and a little bit lackluster. They focused on the wrong characters. The initial trailer was incredibly misleading. So when I watched it, I felt like I was very duped about what kind of show I was going into.
And what kind of show were you expecting, and how would you have changed it?
I think they spent too much time showing us how horrible the superheroes really were, because it seemed like every episode they were doing something really, really shitty. Also, the water guy, I can't remember his name, he raped Starlight, and then they turned him basically into a joke character. They sent him off to some small town in Ohio, and he was walking through the grocery store in his uniform. You know, he kept trying to save these sea creatures and inadvertently killing them. That was a really big risk to take, because the rape happened in episode 1. It was like one of the earliest scenes. And I remember watching that and thinking, okay, this is the kind of show we're going to have. They're going to like constantly be pushing the envelope. And then there were no consequences. Starlight didn't even have any sort of lingering after effects. There was no sort of emotional or psychological damage done to her because of the rape. It was like they just did it for shock value, and then they forgot about it. And I think the show had several moments like that. I would have liked more backstory, I suppose, a little bit, rather than just seeing these people do bad things. The boys themselves, I was ambivalent towards them. It was basically a show where you weren't rooting for anybody.
Yeah.
And even if you have anti-heroes and unlikable characters, you need to be rooting for somebody. You need to be invested in somebody, or why are you following the story?
I mean, I would say that's entirely reasonable. I certainly didn't want Huey. I certainly wasn't rooting for him. I think, I don't know, I'm kind of into the whole murdered wife vengeance thing, but then they walked it back at the end, and it just... It was a bit of a waste, you know. Plus, we were all kind of fooled.
I mean, the other thing is the murdered wife vengeance thing.
I know, it's your least favourite trope in film and TV.
It's so overused, and then again they walked it back, which apparently did not happen in the comics.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, God, that is weird, isn't it?
Yeah, because I spoke with a few people on Twitter who'd read the comics and were talking about, you know, how the changes they made and how we all felt about it. And, apparently she's still dead in the comics, and what's his name did kill her. Homelander. So yeah, I just think it's a show that had a lot of promise, and it just didn't deliver, and it disappointed me, and I get personally offended when shows disappoint me. I hate seeing really good concepts ruined by a lack of ambition and a lack of bravery, and I think that's what happened with this show. They created this really dynamic pilot episode, and were like, that sort of meant to set the tone, but then they backed away from all of the hard issues that they brought up. They should have just kind of gone for them, and I think even Carl Urban couldn't save this show.
I just remember the show for the set pieces mainly. I'll watch season 2. I'd be curious to see if they make any changes, but this isn't great.
Yeah, I mean, I'll watch season 2. I'm definitely going to read the comic, but unless they do something like fundamentally different in season 2, I would probably relegate it to the area of Krypton, and maybe we can get The Boys cancelled too.
So that wasn't your main one, was it? Have you got one more?
Yeah, American Horror Story.
Oh, okay. No, I ummed and ahed about American Horror Story, I must admit. Of all the apocalypse we've seen, it may have been the worst.
Yeah.
I think there was one good moment in the whole season, and that's when the three witches walked into the bunker to that music. Was it a bit of Rolling Stones or something? I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't
She
remember.
wears colours in her hair or something. That was it for me, the whole entire season. I did think the devil was well cast, or the grown-up version of the kid, but nothing about this season I enjoyed. I really didn't get the whole group of them in there for like the first 2 or 3 episodes. Who were just all killed.
They were just killed, and that was it, and we never spoke about them again.
What a waste of time.
I love the concept of the apocalypse. The trailers leading up to it, the aesthetic all looked really cool and really interesting, and then it was like they couldn't figure out what story they wanted to tell. First we had the people in the bunker. We went on that for like 3 or 4 episodes, then they all got killed. Then we went on the Antichrist story. Then we skipped over to the witches.
Bit of Murder House.
I think a lot of this season was fan service. Like, they really, really promoted the fact that they were tying all of these different seasons together, but I think they got too excited about how many they could actually connect, and a lot of the connections were very tenuous.
Bit of Hotel as well, didn't it?
Yeah.
James Patrick March was in it.
Yeah. We briefly went to the hotel, we briefly went to Murder House. Yeah, I would say this was a fan service episode, and largely capitalizing on the success of Coven, which was not my favorite season, but I can see why a lot of people liked it.
It's not even my top 3, to be honest. I thought it was a strange one to focus on. I think a lot of people probably did enjoy it, and they were maybe who this was aimed at.
Coven's not in my top 3, but I do know a lot of people enjoyed it.
What are your top 3 American Horror Story series?
Asylum, Murder House. I don't know if I have a top 3. I might have to come back to you on that one.
That's the top 2. Probably the same as my top 2, if I'm being honest. A soft spot for Hotel, and I do like elements of Freak Show.
Hotel will be in my top 3. It'll be my number 3 one. It's not horror, but it did have good characters and a good story. I like the characters in Coven. The story, not so much. So like I did enjoy seeing them again in Apocalypse. Again, the story wasn't there, and it's really not enough just to have good characters. I know I sometimes I go against that and say that if you have a good character, I'm there for you, but
a great hero or a great villain can save a TV show. We do see it happen occasionally, but not here.
I think it's much more difficult with an ensemble cast. If you have kind of a lackluster plot, but a really dynamic main character, that can work. But if you have a lackluster plot and like 12 interesting characters, it's a little bit different because you don't bond as closely with each of the characters because there's so many of them, and you're also trying to keep track of who's who and how they're related and all of these other things. American Horror Story Apocalypse just lacked some direction. I don't know what they were trying to do, but they didn't succeed.
Okay, well that was our review of 2018-2019, best of and worst of this kind of season we've just had as we come into 2019-2020. What are you looking forward to?
That is a good question.
I'm looking forward to the Elseworlds crossover. I'm looking forward to The Witcher. I'll give Watchmen a go. More Umbrella Academy. Titans Series 2 could be, you never know what it could turn out to be.
I would say, yeah, I'm looking forward to all those things. Titans, Doom Patrol, Umbrella Academy, definitely want more of those. Very curious about The Witcher. I'm not a huge fan of Henry Cavill. Of course, I've only seen him as Superman, and I'm not a fan of his version of Superman. I do really like The Witcher game series, so I'm interested to see how they play it out in a TV show. Loki, I'm excited about that. I go back and forth about the What If series. Like, they've got a lot of big names attached to it. They've got a lot of good ideas that they're kind of drip feeding to us. But I think it also has the potential to be a huge disaster. So I'm curious about that. Oh, the American Horror Story this season.
1984.
Yeah. I'm really, really looking forward to the whole slasher thing, and all of the like previews I've seen of it so far just seem like really in the atmosphere of the 1980s slasher film. So hopefully, fingers crossed, they get it right.
I'm hoping it's kind of a return to basics for the whole show in general.
I think that's really been their strength. Like, if you think about Murder House, it was a very simple concept. but they did a lot with it.
Yeah.
Asylum was kind of similar. I mean, they did have the alien thing thrown in, which was a little bit weird.
And the weird mutants as well.
Yeah. But overall, it was about being a serial killer and being trapped in an asylum, which is, again, very kind of basic grassroots horror elements. So hopefully they'll return to that a little bit.
Yeah, looking forward to it. So yeah, I think that's it. I think we've covered our best and worst of 2018, 2019. We are on Patreon, patreon.com/Geek and Nerd. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/The Geekly. We are on Twitter @GeekNerdPod. And we have an amazing website, geeknerdpod.com. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.